Okay, welcome everybody. We'll wait just another minute to help people get settled, and just make sure if you need to set up your audio or anything like that. Um, I will. This will be recorded and pushed out. So I'll send out the slide deck as well. So if you guys have any questions or want to follow up on anything, you can reach out to me. My contact information is on here. But I do want to just respect everybody's time and try to keep these webinars and everything pretty tight. I know, especially for some of you younger guys, you might be spending a lot of time on the Zoom or on a Google Meet. So clearly you're here because you're interested in the topic, and we really appreciate that. So I'm going to get right into it. And if you can just, as everyone's getting settled, if you can just in the chat, if you feel comfortable, just putting what sport you play and what grade you're in. So that might kind of help give us an idea a little bit of who's in the room and what we want to talk about. All right. So my name is Rob Flynn. I'm going to hide my self view because that is very distracting for me to look at myself talk this whole time. But basically, I'm the academic director at Centercourt 360. So I help manage some of the content and programming for some of our sports teams. I'm a football lacrosse coach at Del Barton School. I've done that for 14 years. I've varsity football, middle school lacrosse, and I've coached and helped guys succeed in football at really every level, whether it's Division III, FBS, FCS, and even professional level. So that's really a lot of where my personal background is. I've had two brothers play Ivy League lacrosse. So certainly have had some experience talking with them, and my other background in the school is within tech integration and as a learning specialist. So wear a couple different hats at the school. So happy to answer any kind of questions that you guys have. So I see, and thank you for guys for using the chat. See a bunch of ninth graders, which is great. Couple guys for a little bit younger. So if you guys have specific questions about like when should I do this, or what age is it appropriate to do this, that's totally fine. Maybe these are some conversations that we'll have that you won't act on some of these tips until you get later into your high school career, and that's fine too. So appreciate everybody being here. So just to frame this process for everybody and sort of give you some organization to what we're going to talk about. The first thing I'm going to just mention has to do with personal branding. That is a very loaded term. I don't love the term personal branding, and I don't, there's a lot of things about social media that are very problematic for adults, for kids. But just as a concept, the first part is how do I present myself online? All right. And it's important that that is authentic. You guys are human beings. You're ninth graders. You don't need to feel like you're a brand the same way that Nike is a brand, or that you have to have some very like ultra curated, careful thing. But we should be thinking about what we're putting out there, how we're presenting ourselves, and I know this is something that you guys hear a lot. So that's something we can work on right now. As you guys get older and as we get into, sophomore, junior year of high school, and you start developing and kind of seeing where your skills are, we're gonna talk about identifying the right fit in terms of a college, and what are some processes that you guys can do and using social media in order to do that, using the internet in order to do that, and then recruiting yourself. I think I was sort of naive when I broke into coaching a little bit, that if you're good, that coaches will find you, that they get paid a lot of money in order to do this, and just be patient and trust the process and sort of all those things. And I think to some degree that's certainly true. You certainly can't force yourself onto a Division I team, but I think there are things that you can do to get on people's radar that are productive and are not a waste of your time, and are not inappropriate for you to do. And I think not only are good things to do within the recruiting process, but I think just good life lessons and good life skills for you to learn in terms of self-advocating and talking to an adult. So this is going to be kind of the steps that we talk about today. All right, so along with that though, it's important to understand that every sport is different in terms of the recruiting process. All right. Hockey is certainly extremely different from football, extremely different from baseball, lacrosse. And so, I'm going to try to give you some general ideas, but there is a wide degree of variation between all sports. And if you have any specific questions, I can try to give you as much knowledge that I have personally. So with that, it's very important that you talk to your coaches and get feedback. So if you're involved with a Centercourt team, you're involved with a club team, you're involved with a high school team, get as much feedback as you can about all parts of the process. What coaches, can you talk to? We're going to talk about highlight films and things like that, getting feedback from coaches there, all that stuff. And there are a lot of different ways that you can do the recruiting process and be successful. So it's certainly not a one size fits all. Guys and gals do it in a different way. And, ultimately you have to do it and you have to manage this process with your family in a way that you're comfortable with. So that's sort of a caveat to some of the general statements that I'll make and general advice that I'll give to everybody. So the first thing that I would recommend that you guys do is what we call social media audit. So this is something you can do while you're sitting listening to me right now. So this involves Googling your full name and your school. So I would Google Rob Flynn Delbarton, and just to see what actually comes up. And honestly, like if I did that right now, see if I'm still sharing my screen here. Like if I did that right now, Rob Flynn Delbarton, right? What would be the first thing that kind of comes up? Well, it's my LinkedIn, my Twitter account. Then there's some different some articles that I've of things that I've been involved with at school, my teachers, and some different things related to that. It's a presentation that I made so this is a relatively positive. These are things that I are involved with, but you guys will be very different than that as kids, obviously, and that's fine. But that's basically the activity. So is if I Google your name, I Google, because this is what college recruiters are going to do. This is what anybody's going to do if they're getting to know you. As soon as I kind of come into contact with somebody that I might be working with, an athlete that I might be interested in, I just Google their name. And I Google, whether it's their school or something like that. And if I find nothing, that's not necessarily negative, obviously, but you want to find is there any negative or outdated or irrelevant content? So obviously there's something, negative or racial or bias or things like that, then you want to eliminate that. But if you have accounts or something that are old, you want to eliminate, you want to get rid of those. So you might have, if some of you guys are young now, you're in 7th grade, you might be using an account, a Snapchat account or Instagram account that you'd let go dormant for a couple years, but it's still tied to your name. So if it is outdated or if it is irrelevant, if you don't use it anymore, delete the account. Just today, there's an article in the New York Times about one of the editors of Teen Vogue has to leave because of tweets that she made that were racist from like 12 years ago. So she was literally like in 6th or 7th grade, I think, when this happened. So that's a very preventable thing to just kind of scrub that stuff from as much as you can. All right, so deleting old accounts, check your privacy settings, make public the things you want to make public, and to try to not, and we'll talk more about this as we go on, but don't just make everything private. So if I'm recruiting 2 players and I can Google one person's name and there's nothing there, and I can Google another person's name and there's some stuff there, there's a video, there's a skills video, or there's just something about him being a positive member of the community, I'm certainly going to gain a better impression of that person that has a little bit of content out there. So I would encourage as you get into 9th and 10th grade, to have some form of a public professional social media account. That could be Twitter, that could be Instagram. As you get older, I'll talk about LinkedIn briefly at the end of class. But in addition to maybe the Instagram account that you have, that's private for your friends, I would consider a professional public account, and I'll show you what that some versions of that later on as we go. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, and I would say this is something as you start the recruiting process. So for many of you now, this is going to happen at different times. If you're an elite athlete, if you're an elite football player, for instance, a recruiting lacrosse player for that matter, and I'm talking like high level Division I, top 5, top 10, top 20 programs, you're going to start the recruiting process as a freshman. For guys who are on the lower end, that's going to get pushed back to sophomore, junior year. So just to give you an idea of some of the timeline. But there are tons of recruiting services out there. So if you Google sports recruiting profile, you will find a ton of stuff. And there's lots of ways and some are good, some are bad. But they're all, I think, similar in that there's a paid thing, then there's they're a paid service, and I think they do offer something positive in that they sort of gets you in one place. I'm not going to advocate for one over another right now because I don't honestly have a ton of experience using them, because the sports that I coach, I don't use them. But this is certainly something to ask your club coach if they have, or ask your high school coach, is there a recruiting service or recruiting profile that you would recommend? I know some of our sports teams and our CLC team and our field hockey team and our baseball team can give you good feedback on that. All right, but here's some things that you have to remember with these recruiting services. So do not just say, oh, I signed up for Sports Recruit. I have my Sports Recruit site, and so I'm good. Because, all right, and this is relatively informal, but the yield rate with these recruiting services profiles is not super high. So there's certainly, for college coaches, I think it's a tool that they use, but it's certainly not the only tool. So if you're relying on a recruiting service to do the work of recruiting for you, then that's a problem. So don't have it be something you just do, because they're passive. So these are not going to do the work for you. We're going to talk about taking steps about like building a relationship with a college coach, reaching out, showing your maturity, in addition to maybe having one of these recruiting profiles. And certainly you can use one of these, or you could just have a recruiting profile like for football players. They really just do this through Twitter, and that's sort of unique to football in some ways. But you don't have to use a paid site either in order to create a profile. Excuse me. All right, here we go. So whether you use Twitter or Instagram or a recruiting website or some combination of those things, as you're creating this recruiting profile, you need to have a highlighter skills video. And we'll talk a lot in some more detail about this in just a second. You should have stats and standardized statistics. And what I mean by standardized is, 100-meter dash is a 100-meter dash, whether you're in Texas or you're in New Jersey. So, 98 miles an hour fastball is 98 miles an hour. So if you can have statistics that are, or measurements, height and weights, things like that are and speed numbers that you can really verify and be standardized, then that's helpful. Things like even some weightlifting numbers are, I think people take with a grain of salt, but like, hey, I had 120 goals, or I had 10 goals, whether you have 5 goals depending on your league versus 50 goals is totally different because of the competition. So that's not a standardized statistic. All right. This is also where I think being a multiple sport athlete is an advantage if you have like track numbers, or if like we have some football guys who throw the shot. kind of thing, and it shows some explosiveness. So just kind of food for thought there. Definitely think about and adding if your transcript, your GPA, and your test scores. And some people might feel obviously hesitant. I mean, if you have a low GPA or even if you have a very high GPA, for a lot of reasons, you might be hesitant to put your GPA or put your test scores out there. But it is a major part of the process for schools. So just as a way to not waste your time and not waste the coach's time, to make that your GPA and your by test scores, I mean SAT, ACT, not necessarily you have to put your whole college, high school transcript on there. But to make that really clear to those coaches when you get those scores, probably midway through your junior year up to the beginning of your senior year, that is going to either let you into the next step of the recruiting process or probably cross your name off the list, unless you are an extremely elite athlete. And very few of us are, to be honest. If you have a coach contact, so if your high school coach typically is going to be the one that manages the recruiting, and I know in some sports it might be the college coach, but who should, think of it this way, if I'm a college coach, who should I contact in order to start the recruiting process? Maybe that's you, maybe that's your parents in some way, but your contact info, and that's really what we're looking at. So here's kind of a visual. Again, I'm using football as an example, but this is obviously a Twitter account. It has the student's name, his real name. It has where he lives. It has a huddle link to a skills and highlight video. And the bio has GPA, SAT. It has what class they are. It has like pertinent, important information because recruiters are dealing with so many kinds of kids. All right. So, and then obviously within this social media profile, to think about who are you following, and to be careful about not just what you're tweeting, but what you're liking, and that whatever Instagram, if you're using Instagram, it's the same concept, right? So you got to think about what kind of content you're endorsing by liking something and what content you're putting on there. And that's kind of a whole nother talk, is managing and curating a social media profile. But so we'll kind of jump on that. So all about the video. All right, meaning the skills video. I'm a coach. Part of my job is to evaluate players, and it is extremely easy for me to do as an experienced coach to get an evaluation of a player if I can see them actually doing certain things related to football or lacrosse. It does not take a lot of time for me to form an impression, and I think for most college coaches, an accurate impression. So the video is everything, is sort of the eyeball test. And I think once you pass, so what typically the process is going to be something like, you reach out, the video kind of gets you in the door. The video in many sports is kind of makes the coach go, oh, okay, I see something here. I see, a baseball player. I see somebody who moves like a field hockey player. Then from there, they might want to do the eyeball test where they see you in person, or they come to a competition, they see you compete, and you kind of go down the road a little bit. So it really is a critical part of making a good first impression. So, and with that, obviously you want to have the first 10 or 15 seconds of the video be the best thing that you can do. So you have to be self-critical about your game. What are your strengths? What are your strengths? Well, if you're a really physical lacrosse player, you want to show that early on. If you have great speed, you want to show that speed right off the bat. And this is where feedback can be really helpful for your college coach. Like what are some things that, feedback from your club or from your high school coach, what should I show early on? All right, from there, you want to show a variety of skills and strengths. So I know what I say to my defensive linemen in terms of what they're trying to show in their highlight video, because I'm a football coach. But for field hockey, you want to be clear about, like, what are some of the different things that they want me to do? Well, maybe in lacrosse, you want to see a right-handed shot and a left-handed shot. Maybe they want to see you dodge, and they also want to see you ride and play defense and maybe clear the ball. And this is going to be different with different sports. This is going to be different with different positions within the sport. But in general, you don't want to show, if you're a girls lacrosse player, you don't want to have 10 right-handed shots in a row. You want to show the variety of your skills while still kind of highlighting your strengths as much as you can. So this is really where you have to plan it out, and you have to really think about what the structure, just like you're writing an essay in class, the structure of what you're trying to do. Now, that being said, it can be a mixture of workout and game clips. So there are certainly cases where guys get recruited, and because they do a box jump or they run a time or run a 40 time, that makes a college coach go, whoa, wait a minute, that's I got to take another look at. So you can have, in terms of showing those strengths, maybe you have a really strong bench press. Maybe that's an important part of your game. I know I've talked to baseball coaches where they want to see that you are a physical player. They want to see your physical development, that you're strong. I'm sure that's the case with many sports, with many field sports as well. That all the professional editing and music and all of those things are not important. They're just not. Having quality video is important. Having the perspective be clear is important. The order of it is important. The rest of it, that probably people charge a lot of money for, is not important. You don't want it to look like you did it on your phone in 5 seconds, but you certainly don't need to spend a lot of money on it. And I think, more than anything, you want to see your movement skills. Athletics is really about how kids, in my opinion, about how kids move. And so whether that's hitting or in fielding, if I'm recruiting an infielder, I want to see him range hard and get deep in the hole and be able to pick a ball and turn and throw it. I want to see how smooth he tracks the ball, things like that. And that's what I mean, where coaches get very good at seeing kids and what's natural for them and what looks, easy versus in terms of their movement, and what looks forced. So, but that being said, you don't want to you want to show your movement skills as much as possible. All right. And not long. So think about keeping it to 2 to 3 minutes, keeping the clips short, and trying to have some discipline in your planning as you're doing that. All right. And then once you create the video, send it to your high school coach, to your club coach. Hey, what do you think about this? It will probably take you'll do the whole video. Let's say, one of you guys go and gets motivated and says, all right, I'm going to do this. It might, in the first version that you do, there's going to be a lot of things on it that you don't think are a problem that are a problem. So it's going to expect and to take you like maybe 2 or 3 drafts or versions of the video in order to really get it to where I think you want to get it to. All right. That's my opinion. That's my experience. All right. So now I'm going to move kind of fast because 7:24. I want to try to keep this pretty tight. You want to check out what's out there. So you want to think about now using social media to kind of recruit yourself. So come up with a list of prospective schools and leagues. Are you, like, I played in the NESCAC. Maybe you're thinking about being a Patriot League player. Maybe you want to be a D2 player. Maybe you're an Ivy League player, right? And not just the school. I think many people have like the school, man, I'd love to just like play lacrosse at Virginia or something like that. But, are you an ACC caliber lacrosse player, right? And think about like some variety here. There are great academic schools in every one of these leagues, whether it's Division I, Division II, or Division III. Think about what part of the country you want to live in terms of school. So things like that. So come up with prospective schools, and then find the athletes that go to those schools. I think you'd be really surprised. I think some people think that lacrosse players, collegiate lacrosse players, are these, just these incredibly skilled players. And many of them, yes, have great lacrosse skill, but they have incredible height, weight, speed measurables. And, many of them are very, very accomplished multi-sport athletes. So really look closely at and Google those kids. Like, look at their recruiting class, look at, try to find and compare yourself. How do you, are you the same size as those guys? Are you the same kind of speed as those guys? Are you accomplishing what you want to accomplish? Are you a varsity player? There's a certain amount of self-reflection here that's very important. And I think you need to be able to have those honest conversations with your coaches as well. And if you ask them honestly, coach, can I play at this level? You'll get an honest answer. Now, some of you guys are in 9th grade. So if that's a totally different question, because the answer very well could be, I don't know. I don't know if you can play at that level. So time kind of has to tell with some of that. And then obviously talking with your parents and trying to refine, like, and literally have a list of, like, these are the programs that I'm going to target. These are the leagues that I'm going to go for. Maybe, yeah, I think I can be an Ivy League player. I want to be an Ivy League player. Maybe I want to be a Division I player. Maybe I want to play at Rutgers. Maybe I want to be a Division III player and look at the NESCACs. Well, what are your grades like? Like, look at and Google some of those kids. Well, what are their GPAs? I'm going to guarantee you they're pretty high to play at some of those schools. All right. And so now, once you have that list of schools, you have your highlight video, maybe you're a sophomore, junior, depending on, again, this is different for different sports, different levels. Reach out to college coaches, reach out to them directly. It's not bad for you to do that. Okay, here are some things for you to think about. The questionnaire. So every college athletics program has a questionnaire or recruiting questionnaire. So you can go, if you're interested in Bowdoin, you can go to, bowdoin.edu, go to their athletics page, get in their database and fill out their questionnaire. It's honestly, it's usually very extensive. And one of the first questions a coach is going to ask you after they contact you, did you fill out our questionnaire? Because if you're not in their database, then you don't exist to them. All right, so that's a very base level of something that you can do. And then once you do that, email, craft a personalized email specific to that coach or program. So when you're emailing a college coach, all right, again, in terms of timing, right? This is sort of junior, senior year. Maybe, for some, like I know for some lacrosse players, it starts earlier. It starts in the freshman summer. But there are contact rules with this. So these are things you have to ask your high school and club coaches. But subject line that captures the intention. So this is something from baseball, obviously. Include your name, your graduation year, your position, your contact info, sort of all the sort of pertinent information, academic information, the link to the skills video, and I think very importantly, why are you interested in the school? So, and then to say, yes, you filled out the questionnaire. So, and then if you are playing in tournaments, maybe it's going into the summer, then you can, just want to check the chat here for a second. Contact the coach first, organize it. I would say make sure you're in the database. So let me show you an example here. Where this is an email where I believe that the student says, obviously this is a sample email, but where you want to say in that time, somewhere in this email, yes, like I filled out your online questionnaire and included more information there, including my site. So like the questionnaire, if you guys go through some of these questionnaires, they're long, they're extensive. So these emails are not like, for you to give all your biographical information, you know, since the dawn of time. It's just to get this sort of pertinent stuff to think about the scheduling, think about your GPA, and again, like specific reasons in here why you're actually interested. Because college coaches, like I mean, they want to make sure you're a good fit. They want to make sure that you actually are interested in the school. And it is reciprocal. It's not just like they don't want to just be chasing you all the time. So it is about building a relationship with the coach if you can. And sometimes the relation, you know, it's you reach out to the coach, say, hey, I want to play this level. And it's like, well, you can't, you know, you're not good enough. And a lot of times that communication back to you is just in the form of silence, unfortunately. So that's why having different leagues and different levels that you'd be interested in is important. So you can keep up that contact. So every month or two, you know, would be appropriate. If the coach is responsive to you and you're going back and forth every week, I think that's fine. And you can just update where you're playing games and anything, you know, recently that you accomplished. Coach, you know, I played in a couple games over the weekend. I was an MVP, or I scored a couple goals, whatever it actually is. All right, just to keep them up to date. And then it's 7:31, moving fast here, but for you to consider as you get into you know, later on in high school, to create a LinkedIn account, because these same skills that we're talking about are career readiness skills. Marketing yourself, reaching out to people, and advocating for yourself, trying to find the right fit in using the internet to identify and reflect for yourself a place that you could fit in terms of your career. So LinkedIn is available. You know, most people think of it for old people, and it is really, it is old. I think it's 18 or 19 years old. It's a very, very old social, not old social, but it's been around a long time. And it has a tremendous search engine. It's great for increasing your network, and it has a whole messaging app. So this is just kind of like a throw it out there to you that as you get to be 16 years old, to think about creating a LinkedIn account, just like you're trying to advocate for yourself as your student athlete. Well, on some level, you're going to turn pro in something, and LinkedIn and having and building a LinkedIn brand for yourself can also be a huge benefit. So just to wrap up, and I'll take some Q&A here for a few minutes at the end if guys have questions. But just, you know, if you're kind of coming out of this webinar, what are some things that I could do, actionable items? All right, so like our freshman level of commitment, you know, maybe you just Google your name, school, maybe you remove any comment, you know, over JV, create, you know, to take the next step, you know, create a open searchable recruiting account. Maybe that's through social media, maybe that's through a paid service. Talk to your coaches about what content to include on a skills video. Start that conversation with your high school coach, with your club coach, or maybe, you know, you're ready to take that next step where you create the skills video, get feedback, identify schools that are a good fit for you, fill out questionnaires, reaching out to college coaches, and all that stuff. So that's kind of my pitch to you, is to think about doing something, you know, to hopefully leave this and say, these are things that I can do to help myself, and you know, maybe not today, maybe not even this year, but as you kind of go forward. All right, so thank you. You can find me at Mr. Flynn Wave on Twitter, and my email through Centercourt is right there. So I'll stop sharing my screen. Wow, there's a lot of people that showed up. Cool. If you have a question and you want to put it in the chat, great. If you have a question and you want to just verbal it and unmute yourself, that's great. I'm going to take a sip of my water, but happy to answer some questions here as we wrap. All right, I'll wait just another minute in case people are working on the chat. I know sometimes that takes a minute to write it out. Great question. If you play two sports, should you create Insta accounts for each or combine? Great question. No, you should combine them. You should combine them. Well, I don't know. I'm curious if somebody else would have a different opinion on this. Here's why I would say combine them. Is because you're exactly right, Shannon, to show that you're a multi-sport athlete. So especially I think in girls sports, if I'm recruiting you for lacrosse, your success as a soccer player, I'm just making this up, is relevant and important. So I would actually try to, if you think about an Instagram account that's going to be your sort of public recruiting account, I would try to put in there and try to as much positive stuff as I could. So both, if you play whatever sports you play, to put content in there from there. If you do strength and conditioning where you're doing something, where you're running or jumping or lifting or something that's impressive, you could post that. Academic achievements, service achievements, things that you're doing with your school. You make the National Honor Society, something like that. So think of it as kind of an all-inclusive picture, because all those things are relevant to being recruited. So really good question. And you never know, especially you guys if you're younger, we've certainly had really high level athletes that are recruited. They think initially they're going to go to school for this sport, and they just develop late, and schools are really interested in them, and they're multiple sport kids. So really good question. So someone asked me if you want to play. The question is, if you want to play Division III, should you start reaching out to coaches as a freshman? And I think, first of all, I played Division III. Division III sports is extremely competitive. So, there's nothing. If that's your goal, that is a great goal to have. In terms of whether or not as a freshman you should be reaching out, my first instinct would be that's too early. I would wait, I think, at least a year, but I'm not sure what sport we're talking about. Let's see. Oh, field hockey. My first instinct is that that's too early, but I would ask your high school or club coach just to confirm that, and maybe maybe doing, in terms of reaching out to coaches, maybe the questionnaire. Because here's the other thing too, like if you reach out too early and then you could give an impression that is not you as a developed athlete. You know what I mean? Like you want to wait, I think, until and think about your contact with those college coaches until like you're ready to be recruited, if that makes sense. Which I know that's sometimes a hard line to understand, but I would ask that question directly to your high school or club coaches, and I think you'll get, if you're really ask them in an open way, I think you'll get a clear and open answer. So great question there. Any other questions that I can help you guys with? Great, thank you guys. All right, well, hopefully this was productive for you. If something comes up or you want to reach out to me directly, I will email everybody the recording of this. It'll take a couple of days to process it and clean it up, but it'll be on our YouTube, on our Centercourt 360 YouTube, and I'll send out the slide deck for everybody. So have a great night. Good luck with what you're with your goals and what you're doing, and I hope I hope this webinar and Centercourt can help you guys accomplish the things that you want to accomplish. So Thank you for being here, and have a great night.